I was just trying to be polite. That's how it started. A casual Sunday afternoon, one of those days where the air feels confused, half spring, half winter, warm on your skin but not enough to leave your jacket behind. I'd only known Lucas for a couple weeks. He was younger than me, 21, sharp-tongued, funny in a dry way, like he always had a joke tucked behind his molars. We met at the tech shop where we both worked. I handled the customers who didn't know what a charging port was, and he fixed the phones like a magician behind a curtain. We clicked fast. Same dark humor, same love for Zeppelin and bad diner coffee. He invited me over one weekend, said he and a few friends were gaming. I said sure, thinking it'd be some apartment filled with laundry piles and empty Gatorade bottles. But when I pulled up, it was a clean, two-story house with a trimmed lawn and an American flag on the porch. I remember checking the address twice. Before I could even knock, Lucas opened the door wearing socks and sweatpants, holding a bag of chips. "Come in, dude. Don't mind my mom. She's always around." I followed him inside, shoes squeaking slightly on the polished floor. The house smelled like fabric softener and something baking. Maybe cinnamon. And then I saw her. She was crossing from the kitchen with a glass in hand, moving like someone who didn't know people were watching, or maybe someone who always knew and just didn't care. Tight jeans, plain white t-shirt, hair tied back in a way that made her look effortlessly sharp. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, but something about her made you want to stand straighter. I didn't know what to say. For a moment, I wasn't even sure what day it was. "Oh, hi," she said, smiling like we already knew each other. "You must be Andy." Her voice wasn't flirty. It wasn't cold either. Just warm, real, like the heat that sits in your hands after holding a mug too long. Yeah," I stammered. "Nice to meet you, ma'am." I wanted to disappear immediately after saying it. She laughed lightly and walked past us toward the living room. "No need for ma'am. Just call me Rebecca." Lucas rolled his eyes. "Mom, stop charming my friends." "I'm just being polite," she replied, winking, not cartoonish, not exaggerated, just enough to make my brain stall. Then she vanished down the hallway like nothing had happened. We went to the living room and started setting up the game. Lucas talked about some coworker who always overshared at work, and I nodded along, but part of me wasn't even there. Not really. Rebecca's voice was still looping somewhere in the back of my head, soft and amused. At some point, she walked behind the couch, heading toward the laundry room. The scent of something clean, maybe lavender, lingered. I caught myself turning my head just slightly as she passed. Not staring. Just noticing. There was a moment, between one level loading and the next, where everything felt strangely loud. Like the ticking of the clock on the wall, the hum of the fridge, the shifting weight of what I couldn't name yet. I sat there gripping the controller, not playing, just thinking about that smile. That glance. That second where time hiccuped. It wasn't that she was beautiful, though she was. It was that she had presence. A kind of stillness that made you feel like the room had a center again. I didn't say much for the rest of the game. Lucas didn't notice. He was trash-talking the AI and throwing chips into his mouth like he hadn't eaten in days. And I was trying to stop myself from glancing toward the hallway again. Later, as I was heading out, Rebecca passed through the entryway and opened the door for me. "Thanks for coming by," she said softly. "Lucas needs more grounded friends like you." I shoved my hands in my jacket pockets, suddenly unsure what to do with them. "Thanks. And sorry if I said something weird earlier." "The ma'am thing." She tilted her head, smile unchanged. "You didn't." It was sweet. And then she held the door, waited for me to step outside, and closed it gently behind me. No extra words. No long look. I sat in my car for a minute before starting it, just gripping the steering wheel and staring ahead like I was waiting for a sign. But there was only the soft sound of the wind brushing against the windows. She didn't look like someone's mom. She looked like the beginning of a story I wasn't ready to read. It happened so fast I didn't even realize I said it out loud. Lucas and I were halfway through a game, sitting side by side on the couch, controllers in hand, trading commentary about a coworker who always overshared. Rebecca had passed behind the couch once or twice, going about her day, humming softly under her breath like people do when they're relaxed in their own home. I think that's what got me. The way she didn't perform, didn't try. Just existed, quietly magnetic. And then the word slipped. I laughed at something Lucas said and, without thinking, let it fall out of my mouth. Dude, your mom looks better than girls my age. Lucas stopped mid-button press. His character froze on screen, blinking in place. His head turned slowly toward me. What? And that's when I realized I hadn't just thought it, I'd said it. I felt the heat creep into my face instantly. My tongue tried to backpedal before my brain could form a proper excuse. Nothing. I just meant, she looks young. For a mom. That's all. Lucas squinted, the corner of his mouth pulling down like he was deciding whether to be mad or just chalk it up to a weird comment. He didn't respond. Just hit resume on the game and kept playing. But that wasn't the worst part. Because I saw her. Rebecca had paused at the edge of the kitchen doorway. She was holding something, maybe a glass or a dish towel, I honestly couldn't remember later, but her eyes had shifted. Not wide or angry. Just, aware. There was a small pause, barely a second, but in that second, I knew she heard. Or at least heard enough. And then, she did something I didn't expect. She smiled. Not big. Not obvious. Just a faint curve at the edge of her lips, the kind that tries to hide itself but doesn't quite succeed. Her cheeks flushed, a soft pink. She turned away before I could read more into it and disappeared back into the kitchen. I stared at the spot where she'd been standing like it might tell me what just happened. Lucas cracked open a soda can and tossed the empty toward the trash. You okay, man? You look like you saw a ghost. I forced a laugh. Nah, just tired. He nodded and kept playing. The game resumed like nothing had shifted. But something had. My head wasn't in it anymore. I sat there going through the motions, my mind running laps around the last 3 seconds. I kept wondering if maybe I was imagining it, her look, that faint smirk, the way her body turned just slightly slower than usual as she walked away. After a while, I stopped trying to play. Lucas didn't seem to notice. He was already deep into trash talk with someone online. When it was time to leave, I grabbed my keys and mumbled a quick thanks. Lucas gave me a half wave from the couch. As I stepped toward the front door, I half expected Rebecca to reappear, to say something, maybe a tease, maybe a quiet reprimand, but she didn't. The house was still. Only the faint sound of game audio and Lucas's voice filled the space. And yet, I felt her presence everywhere. The scent of her perfume still floated faintly in the air. The clean smell of the laundry room. The hum of something left unspoken. I stood at the threshold for a second longer than I needed to, hand on the doorknob, unsure if I was waiting for her or just hoping the moment would replay somehow. It didn't. I walked out into the late afternoon air. It had cooled since I arrived, and the sun had begun to dip behind the trees, throwing long shadows across the sidewalk. I got in my car, shut the door, and just sat there for a bit, the engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel. I thought about the blush. About the smile. About the way she looked at me, not like a scolding parent or a surprised adult, but like someone who hadn't been looked at that way in a while and wasn't quite sure what to do with it. That night, I replayed the moment over and over, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. It didn't feel wrong. It didn't feel like I'd crossed a line. Not yet. But it felt like I was standing at the edge of something I didn't understand. I didn't mean for her to hear it. But part of me didn't regret that she did. She didn't laugh. She didn't scold. She didn't freeze. She blushed. And that blush said more than words ever could. 3 days later, my phone buzzed during my break at work. I was standing behind the counter, half watching a customer struggle to describe what that little circle button on their iPhone was for, when I checked my notifications. Rebecca had followed me on Instagram. At first, I just stared at the screen. Her profile was simple, no selfies, no flashy quotes. Just a few pictures of sunlit corners of her house, a worn paperback with a coffee cup beside it, and a blurry shot of Lucas from what looked like a high school graduation. Then I noticed something else. She'd liked a photo of mine from 2 months ago. It wasn't anything special, just a candid at the beach, hoodie half on, laughing at something off camera. I barely remembered posting it. But she scrolled back that far. She saw something in it. Or maybe she just wanted me to know she'd been looking. I tried to keep my face neutral as I put my phone back in my pocket. My coworker kept talking about cracked screens and battery drains, but my head was somewhere else entirely. I kept hearing her voice, the way she said, "Thanks for coming by," like I'd done something meaningful. That night, I followed her back. No message. No emoji. Just a silent acknowledgement. Like placing a pebble beside someone's on a trail. The next weekend, Lucas texted me again. He mentioned his mom was making lasagna and told me to come early. "You're not allowed to miss this," he wrote. "She goes overboard every time." I arrived just before 4. Same house. Same flag on the porch. I rang the bell this time, unsure if I should just walk in. The door opened, and there she was, wearing an apron over tight jeans and a soft, fitted top. Her hair was up again, a few loose strands brushing her cheek. "Andy," she said, her voice warm like a memory. "Right on time." "It smells amazing in here," I replied, stepping inside. If Lucas didn't hype it so much, I'd say he undersold it. She laughed lightly. "It's my cheat day meal, but I always make too much. You boys better eat like you haven't eaten in days." Lucas was already on the couch, messing with the console. Rebecca asked me to help get plates out. As I reached for the cabinet, she moved in beside me, close enough for our arms to brush. "Thanks," she said quietly, almost like she didn't mean for me to hear it. "For what?" I asked. She leaned in just a little more. "For not pretending like I'm invisible." I stopped for a second, fingers resting on the rim of a plate. I looked at her, really looked, and smiled. "I think you're kind of hard to ignore." She paused, just for a breath, then turned back to the drawer. "Good answer," she said, almost to herself. We ate in the dining room. Lasagna that tasted like it had been simmering for hours, bread that was warm in the center, and a simple salad with too much dressing that somehow still worked. Rebecca sat across the table, scrolling on her phone here and there, but always tuned in, throwing in a sarcastic comment, asking Lucas how school was going, smiling at the right times. She had a way of being present without trying too hard. Like she didn't have to take up space to make it hers. After dinner, Lucas ran upstairs to grab his laptop. I started clearing plates out of habit. Rebecca was at the sink, rinsing one when I stepped beside her with another. "You don't have to do that," she said without looking at me. "I don't mind," I said. "You cooked." She smiled, not at me, just at the faucet. "I like you, Andy. You're calm." I looked at her, unsure how to respond. "Most guys your age try too hard," she added, her voice quieter now. There was a stillness between us. Not awkward. Just full. She didn't look over. I didn't push the moment. I stood there, hands wet from the dish soap, thinking about how natural this felt. Like I'd done it 100 times. She turned off the water, dried her hands, and finally looked at me. "That thing you said last time," she began, "about me looking better than girls your age." I froze. I didn't know where this was going. "You weren't just saying it, were you?" I cleared my throat. "No. I wasn't." She didn't nod. She didn't smile. She just stood there, eyes steady. People don't say things like that to me anymore. Not genuinely. I wanted to say something back. Something meaningful. But nothing came. So I just stood there. And then she looked away and said, like it wasn't even meant for me, "That's why it stuck." I didn't respond. I couldn't. She went back to wiping the counter, and I just watched her move, quietly, gracefully. The moment passed, but not really. Some things echo louder when you don't talk about them. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Lucas texted me. Said he was heading to his grandma's for a few days and that if I needed to drop anything off, his mom would be home. The message felt casual enough, but something about the way he phrased it, "Mom's home if you need to drop anything off," stuck with me longer than it should have. I didn't reply right away. I didn't have anything to drop off. That evening, I went for a drive. No destination. Just wanted to get out, clear my head. But I found myself turning onto his street like muscle memory, like part of me already knew where I was going before I admitted it. The sun was starting to sink, casting that quiet golden light over rooftops and telephone wires. I parked 2 houses down, just sat there with the engine off. Told myself it was nothing. Just checking in. Saying hey. Seeing how she was. The kind of lies you half believe when the truth feels too loud. When I finally walked up and knocked, the door opened slower than usual. Rebecca stood there in yoga pants and a fitted black hoodie. Her hair was pulled up, no makeup, eyes soft. She looked surprised. Not caught off guard. Just surprised. "Andy," she said, one hand still on the door. "I thought Lucas left you hanging." I scratched the back of my neck. "Yeah, he did. I was just out, figured I'd stop by. Say hi." She leaned against the frame. "You sure you didn't come for more lasagna?" That made me laugh. "Maybe that too." She looked at me for a second longer than necessary, then pushed the door open wider. "Come in." The living room felt the same, familiar in a way that tugged at me. A candle was burning somewhere, vanilla, maybe. The kind of scent that settles into fabric, into memory. "I was just about to make tea," she said, heading toward the kitchen. "You want some?" "Sure," I replied, sliding onto the stool near the counter. We didn't talk much at first. She moved through the kitchen with ease, grabbing mugs, filling the kettle, brushing hair from her face with the back of her hand. I watched her hands more than I meant to. The way her fingers moved, the way she poured water like she'd done it 1,000 times without thinking. It was ordinary. But it wasn't. When she handed me the mug, our fingers touched for a second too long. Not an accident. I knew it by the way her eyes didn't look away after. We sat in the living room, each holding our mugs, letting the steam rise between us like something unsaid. No TV. No background music. Just the faint tick of the wall clock and whatever was sitting in the space between us. "You're not like most of his friends," she said finally. "I'll take that as a compliment." "You should," she smiled. "Most of them don't know how to have an actual conversation. You look people in the eyes. That's rare." I shrugged. "Maybe I just don't want to miss anything." She laughed softly. "Not at me. With me." Then looked down at her tea. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." That compliment, the one you said the first time you were here. About me looking better than girls your age. Did you expect me to be offended? I paused, the mug warm in my hands. No, I said quietly. I thought I'd be embarrassed. But not you. She looked up again, her expression unreadable at first, then slowly softening. I wasn't offended, she said. Just surprised. It's been a while since someone looked at me like that. I didn't know what to say to that. I didn't want to say the wrong thing. So I said nothing. She placed her mug down on the coffee table, gently, like the moment might crack if she made too much noise. And the way you look at me now, she added, almost in a whisper, hasn't gone unnoticed. My heart thudded, heavier than I expected. I set my mug down too, more slowly than I meant to. Is that a bad thing? I asked. She leaned back into the couch, crossing her legs, eyes still on mine. No. It's dangerous. But not bad. The silence returned, thick this time, but not uncomfortable. The air felt warmer. The space smaller. I don't want to cross any lines, I said, barely above a breath. She tilted her head, voice steady. What if I'm the one moving the line? Everything in the room stopped. Not literally. But inside me, something quiet broke open. She didn't smile. She didn't tease. She just watched me, waiting. The kind of waiting that isn't impatient. The kind that invites you in. We stayed there for a while. Neither of us moved. Neither of us needed to. That night, I didn't kiss her. We didn't touch again. But something between us shifted. And once it shifted, I knew it wouldn't shift back. The days after that felt quieter, like something in the air had changed, but no one wanted to say it out loud. Lucas came back from his trip that weekend. He texted me like nothing had happened, asked if I was free, if I wanted to come by, if I was ready to lose at whatever new game he'd downloaded. I said yes, like I always did. And when I showed up, Rebecca was in the kitchen again, like she always was. Same calm energy. Same soft voice. Nothing dramatic. Nothing out of place. But there was a pause when she looked up and saw me. A breath. A flicker in her eyes like we were standing on the same page in a book no one else was reading. We didn't talk about that night. Not directly. But it followed us. She didn't avoid me. She didn't act distant. If anything, she was warmer. More open in those in-between moments. When Lucas left the room, when she passed behind me and her hand lightly brushed my back, when she handed me a drink and her fingers lingered just long enough to make my pulse stutter. I never reached for more. I didn't push. But I was waiting. Not impatiently. Just quietly. One afternoon, Lucas ran upstairs to grab something, and I stayed behind to help with the dishes. Rebecca was already at the sink. I stood beside her, both of us rinsing and stacking without a word. You don't have to keep doing this, she said, not looking at me. I don't mind, I answered, same way I always did. She turned off the faucet, wiped her hands on a towel, then leaned back against the counter and looked at me. Really looked. This, whatever this is, she said slowly, it's getting harder to pretend. I felt my chest tighten. I put the plate down, careful not to let it clink too loudly. I know, I said. She nodded once, like that was all she needed to hear. Then she reached for a bottle of wine on the side shelf. Lucas doesn't like red, she said casually, pulling 2 glasses from the cabinet. But I do. We sat at the kitchen island, the same place we had tea days before, and she poured for both of us. The glass clinked lightly, and the sound felt too sharp in the stillness. She told me about her ex-husband. How he left when Lucas was 14. How she rebuilt everything from scratch, career, house, herself. How she hadn't dated anyone seriously in years because most men her age wanted something she couldn't give. And the younger ones? They wanted something she didn't respect. But you, she said, you don't ask me for anything. I don't want to take anything from you, I said. She smiled, soft and sad. That's why you're different. The wine tasted earthy, a little dry. I barely touched mine. I couldn't stop watching her lips when she spoke, the way they curled at the corners when she shared something honest, something raw. You're looking at me like you want to say something, she said, not accusatory. Just observant. I am. So say it. I hesitated. Then I said, I've been thinking about you. A lot. She didn't blink. Just nodded slowly. Me too. We didn't kiss. Not yet. But everything in that moment felt like a held breath. Later, when I stood to leave, she walked me to the door. Her arms were crossed, leaning slightly on the frame. The porch light above her head made her glow, soft shadows falling across her collarbone. Thanks again, I said, trying to sound casual, failing a little. Anytime, she replied. Then after a beat, you don't have to wait for Lucas to invite you, you know. I looked at her, really looked, and I could feel the space between us shrinking, even if we stood 6 feet apart. I don't? She shook her head once, slow and deliberate. No. Just come. The words settled between us like dust in sunlight. I nodded, stepped outside, and turned back just once. She was still there, watching. Not smiling this time. Just watching. I drove home in silence, no music. Just the hum of the road and the sound of her voice echoing in my head. Not everything needs to be said twice to be heard. Some invitations live in the quiet between two people who already know the answer. It was Thursday evening when I pulled up outside the house again. Lucas's car wasn't in the driveway. That mattered more than I wanted to admit. I didn't knock. I just walked up the steps, reached for the handle, and let myself in. The door gave way with a quiet click, and for a second, I stood there in the entryway, holding my breath like I'd crossed some invisible line. Rebecca was in the kitchen. No apron. No makeup. Just a long, soft t-shirt that barely touched the tops of her thighs and a pair of fuzzy socks. Her hair was tied up loosely, and she turned her head at the sound of the door but didn't seem surprised. I was starting to think you changed your mind, she said, lowering the stove's heat with one hand. I wasn't sure if you meant it, I answered. She gave a small smile. I wouldn't have said it if I didn't. I closed the door behind me, and that click, it echoed louder than it should have. The house felt quieter than usual. Not empty. Just still. I followed her into the kitchen like I'd done it 100 times before. The air smelled like tomato and garlic, something slow-cooked and comforting. Billie Holiday played low from a speaker on the counter. Something soft and smoky. You want to help? She asked. I thought you said I'm the guest of honor tonight. You are. But I like pretending we're just doing this together. So I helped. Nothing big. Just handed her the plates, poured water, stirred the sauce when she asked. The normal stuff that doesn't feel normal when your heart won't sit still. When dinner was ready, she brought 2 bowls over, but instead of sitting across from me at the island, she sat beside me. Closer than she ever had before. We ate, but barely. Most of the conversation floated around things that didn't matter, my classes, a neighbor who still hadn't taken down their Christmas lights, a recipe she wanted to try. And then, she asked something different. What was your childhood like? I told her. Not everything, but enough. About the quiet house I grew up in, the kind of quiet that didn't feel peaceful. How I'd leave on my bike just to feel air move again. How my mom loved too silently, and my dad talked like every sentence cost him something. She listened, head tilted, thumb tracing the rim of her glass. She told me she stayed in this city because she wanted to give Lucas something stable. A place that wouldn't shift under him. She said she never really planned for what came after that. You seem happy now, I said. She looked at me for a moment, like she wasn't sure whether to believe me or not. Then she said, I am right now. And that was it. She leaned in, slow and soft, giving me every chance to stop it. But I didn't. Our lips met. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't urgent. It was quiet. Steady. The kind of kiss that doesn't ask permission but still waits for your heart to catch up. When we pulled apart, I whispered, we probably shouldn't. She cut in gently, but we already did. She stood, walked around the counter, and took my hand in hers. Without a word, she led me into the living room. The lights were dim. The couch looked the same as always, but it felt different now. She sat first, tucking her legs beneath her, turning to face me. You know this can't become a thing, she said quietly. I know. She looked down, fingers twisting a silver ring on her index finger. Not a wedding band. Just something simple. But I also know how I feel when you're around. And I haven't felt that in years. I nodded. Then let's not define it. Let's just have it. For now. She looked back up at me, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. She didn't speak right away. Just held the moment with me. For now, she repeated. We kissed again, longer this time. Certain. When I left that night, Lucas still wasn't home. She walked me to the door, but we didn't say much. There wasn't anything left to say. I stepped outside, and just before I turned, I caught one last look. She wasn't smiling. She was just watching. Like she already knew this wasn't a beginning or an end. Just a moment we'd both come back to, again and again. Some connections aren't loud. They don't scream or spark. They hum, low and steady, and you don't notice them pulling you in until you realize you never want to leave. It didn't turn into chaos. No explosions. No screaming matches. No doors slammed or friendships ruined in the wreckage. It just continued. Quietly. Carefully. Lucas still didn't know. At least, not officially. He joked once about how weirdly well his mom and I got along. I laughed it off, something quick and harmless. But I saw the pause in his eyes, the split second of something sharper, like his brain was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't want to finish. We didn't text. We didn't call. No messages. No hearts. No proof. But when I was over, everything felt different. We were careful, but it lived in the glances. In the way she passed me a drink with her fingers grazing mine. In the small smiles when no one else was looking. In the way we didn't need to say anything at all. And when Lucas left the room, just for a moment, to grab something, to answer a call, those were the seconds where we existed. One time, I came by when he was out late. Just stopped in, like I'd done before. She had her hair down for once, in a long cardigan and no shoes. We didn't plan anything. We never did. But that night, we ended up on the couch again, closer than before, her head on my shoulder, my hand resting where it naturally wanted to be. We talked. Just talked. And then, at some point, I kissed her. She kissed me back. And when I tried to stand up to leave, she reached for my hand and whispered, "Stay." I did. The next morning, I woke up before her. The sun was barely through the curtains. I didn't move. I just watched her sleep. Her face relaxed, her chest rising slowly beneath the blanket. I'd never felt anything like it before. Not excitement. Not thrill. Just peace. A kind of peace I didn't know I'd been missing until it was right there in front of me. We never said what it was. We didn't label it. But we kept coming back to it. Once or twice a week, always unspoken, always gently timed. She'd text Lucas something casual if she knew I was coming. And I'd show up like I had a reason, even if I didn't. Sometimes we had dinner. Sometimes we watched movies. Sometimes we just sat in silence. She told me once, on a night where we shared a bottle of wine out back, wrapped in blankets on the patio, that she didn't expect this. Any of it. "This feels dangerous," she said. I smiled. "Because it is." She turned her head slightly. "Do you regret it?" "No," I answered, without hesitation. "Not even close." She looked at me for a long time, then said nothing. But the way her hand found mine under the blanket said everything. And then came the close call. It was a Saturday. I came over early. Lucas said he'd be gone most of the day. But plans changed. He came home earlier than expected. I was still there. Rebecca didn't panic. She was calm. Effortless. She handed me a soda and said, "You boys hungry?" like nothing was unusual. But I felt it. The shift. The way Lucas looked at me a little too long. The way he glanced between us. Later that night, I texted her. "I think he knows." She replied a few minutes later. "He suspects. But he won't ask. Not unless he's sure." I stared at the screen. Then typed. "Should we stop?" There was a pause. "Do you want to?" I didn't reply right away. I didn't know how to explain that even though I never meant for any of this to happen, I didn't want to undo it either. So I finally sent. Not even a little. She didn't say anything else. Just sent one message back. "Come over tomorrow." So I did. We kept going, like that. Treading lightly, but with full hearts. Sometimes I wondered how long we could keep it this way. If something would eventually break. But then, I'd see her again, and none of that mattered. One evening, I told her, "I don't know where this ends." She leaned her head against my shoulder and said, "Not everything needs an ending." We sat there a while, just like that. Wrapped in silence. Holding something neither of us could define, but both of us knew was real. In a world that moved fast, that demanded clarity and rules and declarations, we found something else. Something softer. Slower. Ours. It was never loud. But it never needed to be. Some of the best things don't announce themselves. They just arrive. And if you're lucky, you recognize them before they're gone.